The Skeptiko Journey with Tsakiris. You're listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Owers Plateau. We are doing this show on our emergency before the backup day, Tuesday. Normally we record on Wednesdays, but today we're doing Tuesday. It's another special show. We're in between deep dive book reports. So we're bringing you guys a kind of a string of guests here. And this is one that I have been looking forward to for a long time. Tsakiris from Skeptiko, from the Skeptiko podcast. I've listened to this podcast for years and years and years. He was one of the inspirations for me in starting our own podcast. And it went fantastically, and just like I thought it would. We got Alex on, we connected with him, and we started talking about all the stuff we're interested in almost immediately. And it was like we realized at some point, several times, we're like, have we started the show yet? No, we haven't started the show yet. Well, we should just start recording. So what you're going to hear is from roughly the beginning of our conversation with Alex. We had already talked to him about several things, but the recording that we have in Zoom, in Logic didn't start until this point. But basically, we just didn't want to stop the flow. So what you're going to hear is pretty much the entire conversation, except for the beginning, maybe 10 minutes or so.
Huge producer mistake.
Yeah. We were completely unable to say, hold on, let us start the show officially.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, we couldn't stop talking to the guy.
Seems to happen so often.
Yes, yeah.
With non-in-studio guests.
That's right. So I hope you guys all enjoy this. I think it was a fantastic conversation. The topics ranged all over the place, but it pretty much went exactly as I hoped it would, and I really enjoyed it.
Yep, same here.
So here we go. This is our interview with Tsakiris from Skeptiko.
Just people get sideways on ancient aliens because they make it like this yes/no answer,
right?
Than
Okay. So the ancient aliens thing, like a lot of people immediately, of course, associate it with the History Channel, the TV show, which is always, it's black. It's like, is it aliens? And they ask that question about everything. And I think first of all, we have to define what are they talking about when you're talking about aliens, Like you've talked to Gordon White, and he talks about how in the ancient times, at some point, it appears that people began to be contacted by something that was alien to them, but may not have been like a physical thing, right? So we're looking at, and then you see cave paintings and things showing up. So they're having visions, maybe using entheogens or DMT or whatever, and people do this today. They see beings or entities that in some cases are reportedly look a lot like what other people report as alien beings. So what is actually happening there? I don't know. But the other thing, we like the Graham Hancock idea of, could it just be in the very distant past? We already know, you've got Denisovans, you have Neanderthals. We already know that there were a lot of people, humans, that just didn't look like what we look like. They were physiologically in many ways very different. We don't know what Denisovans look like, but you can imagine, what if they were very elfin? You have these strange ideas of like the dwarf people and the elf people, and we see some of this. And so could we be looking at sky beings are actually people with technology coming down from the sky, but not necessarily from space, just from somewhere else on the planet? So is there paleo contact somewhere in our history? I don't know. I just listened to your interview with Bruce Fenton. And I'm like, okay, that story, I agree with you when you were saying, you were like, I completely bought it, right? you were saying my job was to actually like try to tear your story down, but I totally bought it for the whole show. I was laughing because I was like, holy crap, this is an amazing story. We need to talk to that guy. We haven't done that yet, but I agree.
You know what? Hold on that one. I was so impressed by Bruce.
Yeah.
That I actually did this long form interview. I actually hired a guy in England to go and interview him, and I turned it into kind of a movie. I'll send it to you.
Oh my God, I would love that.
And you know what we'll do? We'll do, if you guys are up for it, we'll do an episode on it.
Yes.
And or maybe what I'll do is maybe I'll have you guys come on. We'll do a joint episode where we'll have both. I'll put it out on Skeptiko and you can put it out on
Swapcast style. Yeah. Snakes.
And because you'll I'd like to get that kind of dialogue with you guys in terms of, I love that. You know, are you convinced? Now, Russ, did it?
Yes. I was like, okay, I'm buying this. I'm buying it. Now, of course,
Kyle,
Kyle,
I don't know. Did you see any of it yet?
No, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Before you tell me, though, I wanted to finish the thing I was thinking about ancient aliens real quick.
Yeah.
So I do think it's a legitimate question. Number one, that definitely it's a legitimate question based on a lot of the rock paintings and a lot of the structures and the apparent advancements of technology that they must have had. But the thing that I don't hear talked about too much is the idea that, say, far, far in antiquity, humans left Earth.
Right.
Another advanced race of humans left Earth. Wherever they went, they know where we are. They know that they come back to check how are things going. Maybe they left before a cataclysm, and they come back later and they find the remnants and new sort of semi-civilization starting tribes, and then they come down and teach us some stuff, and then they go back home. I mean, that seems plausible to me.
Yeah.
So I like that idea as well.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and that would be like the quote unquote civilizer gods you're talking about, like the Viracochas and the Oannes. Yes.
And the other interesting question about this, we did an interview with Dr. Chandra Wickramasinghe about sort of the panspermia idea, and his idea is that all of these bacteria and microorganisms like viruses and stuff are sort of ubiquitous throughout the galaxy. They're being shared by all of the Earth-like Goldilocks planets where these things can be supported. Every time an impact happens on any of those planets, it throws those things into outer space. Some of them survive, land on other planets. So we're kind of sharing this biome. And so could any of these beings from any of these planets really be considered aliens? This is where you would have to really then begin to define that term. Because if we left Earth and thousands of years later we came back, are we aliens now?
Are we extraterrestrials? Yeah. I mean,
that's what I mean.
They have a terrestrial source if that's what happened.
But whatever planet you end up on over thousands of years, you've now changed and become more like the life on that planet. So I
haven't heard that before, and that is absolutely fantastic. I mean, I just have not heard that, and that's such a key point. It's like, I mean, even if you just take the alien other planet ET thing, which I pretty much, that just seems to fit for me. What you're adding to it is another layer to this diversity thing. You know, it's like, well, how diverse are they? And what if we were to get in there and go, well, you know, we're all kind of like you're saying, you know, we're all kind of starting with this base, you know, so they kind of went that way, and you trace back, it's not as diverse as we think. And that just there's something gut feel that's right about that, because even the most wild alien accounts, they're too much like us.
That's
in
right.
a lot of fucking conniving ways. You know?
That's right. And of course, you look at the very ancient stories about the gods, and they have all the same. You know, they're fighting with each other, and there's politics, and they're betraying each other, and they're just doing all the same stuff that humans do, except that it's much more right. You know, and you're just like, okay, these don't seem like. They don't seem like otherworldly godly beings. They're just humans that have more power than those humans at that time did. And so they're, you know, I agree. I completely agree that story, whether it's humans that left here, and you've gone through this stuff about the yuga cycles, right? You've talked to people about that. So if there are yuga cycles and there are previous ages where people reach some kind of height of mental capacity and spiritual capacity, and then they knew that it was about to start going back downhill, why would you stay in that system? Leave, right? Get out of here. And so they may come back and check on us every once in a while and be like, oh my God, look at what they're doing. Let's try to help them out a bit or something,
Yeah, I was talking to Miguel Connor, who I think is really good and does Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. And this line only kind of relates. He goes, we got to hope Satan doesn't get his hand on the Bible, because if he reads it, and he finds out what's coming, he won't, he's not down with that. He's going to change the whole scheme.
Yeah. 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 That was the Gnostic conversations, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are great. I also recommend everybody who's listening, go check out those shows that he's done with Aeon Byte, all the Skeptiko shows. So, Alex, let's talk about the Skeptiko journey. Why did you, who are you? What is your background, and why did you start your podcast? What was the goal at the beginning, and how has that changed and evolved as time has passed?
Well, we were just having a really good chat about all this stuff. And I guess, the one thing that clicks, and I don't know if this is a direct response to what you're saying, but I tell this story all the time because it's so true in this kind of wild synchronistic way. But, I want to start the podcast. I was always interested. I don't know. I was listening to your guys' history, and it's like my history. Oh, I think it was you, Kyle, talk about how you used to just listen to stuff in all sorts of different ways, that was me, like tapes, and recording stuff off the radio and stuff,
Yes.
I was just trying to scoop this stuff up. So when podcasting came along, it was just a natural extension. I was, in business. I was super money motivated. My family upbringing was kind of be successful, so I just had my head down, you got to be successful. And I liked computers, and I was into that kind of stuff, and it was the right timing. And I was there in Dallas, where you guys are in Texas, and man, things were going and blowing. And I did it, man. I did okay. And I was able to cash out, and I got my money. And then I was able to do what I really wanted to do, which was go on this adventure of learning. And again, as we were chatting about, I thought, oh, this is good, man. I can say I got a podcast, and now I can talk to all these people that I want to talk to. But I guess the point that I was going to make is, so I grabbed a name, because I heard these skeptics out there, and then I heard these other guys who were really interesting to me, the Rupert Sheldrake's, the Dean Radins, the people who were saying, hey, it's not what you see. And I had some kind of sense that it wasn't really like the straight up science guys were telling me, but I was kind of in this in-between zone. So I picked this name, Skeptiko. And it isn't until years later that I say, I got to find out exactly what that means. I go on Wikipedia, and it's like, I'm half Greek. I was brought up Greek Orthodox Church. Love to talk about that, because we never really finished our conversation about your Christian upbringing. But I feel like I'm still, I'm just so out about, I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Christian. And I think I have to say that over and over again, because it still gets stuck in my throat, because that conditioning, you just get it built into you. I feel like, I have to look around for a thunderbolt every time I say I'm not a Christian, but, or you get what people say is, then what are you?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
What do you mean? What am I? I'm just saying what I'm not. Again, I digress, though, because the point is, when I looked up Skeptiko, it's from the ancient Greek philosophers Skeptikos, and their ethos was inquiry to perpetuate doubt. And I just love that. Yep. I think that is such a fit for me. I'm a doubter. Good. I'm a hater, like in Dave Chappelle. I love Dave Chappelle. Yeah. Remember that one? He used to have the haters ball, all the haters, all those guys. I don't intentionally hate on people, but I'm a doubter.
Yeah, I do. I have to say, you bring people on your show and then you just destroy them, and it's fantastic. Sometimes you just I can't always. Sometimes I'm like, okay, this is Alex bringing on somebody he totally disagrees with. I'll save that one for later. Right now, I want to hear him talk to somebody he's agreeing with. But later on, when I'm feeling different, I'm going to go listen to him completely destroy this guy. It's fantastic. You do that really well, man. I think it's great. So you explored the near-death experiences for a long time. I mean, are you still exploring that, or do you think you have a handle on that?
Well, let me turn it around. What do you guys think? Oh, yes, turn it around, because I have taken some notes.
Uh-oh.
Snakes in the weeds.
No.
Episode 105. Watcher comes on and he's spitting some pretty interesting stuff about this guy in a coma.
Yep.
Is he really brain dead? Is he not brain dead? Isn't that part of the thing with near-death experience? Run that down for me, guys. What do you think? This where are we on the near-death experience? Are they really dead? Is consciousness really extending beyond bodily death?
I don't have a definite answer. Obviously, there is room for doubt. But what I believe is true is that I just don't see any way, no matter how much I study physics. I'm not a physicist. I'm just an armchair guy. But I love physics. I love looking into all of the materialistic stuff. And
we call him his beloved materialist reductionist physicist.
Yes, they're my favorite, some of my favorite people in the world. Help me figure out how the universe works. But I don't see how what I have in my mind, my consciousness, is a physical thing. So I think that our consciousnesses do extend beyond the physical realm, whatever that is. And so I think near-death experiences would be, if you have one, you must remember something that happened to you extra physical, beyond the physical, right? I think we kind of do this all the time with our dreams in a way. But I do know a person who's a good friend of mine who had this happen to him in the hospital after a heart attack. And he was outside of his body. He was in the operating room looking at stuff that was going on, that really was going on while he was out. You know, and he has these very interesting recollections. And I don't, something about that just seems right to me. It makes sense. I don't know how else to explain it.
And I don't think that is some kind of strange epiphenomena of a fading brain. That just doesn't. Explanation doesn't make any sense to me.
How does your awareness become so heightened that you begin, without your bodily sensors, picking up the light and the vibrations and all of the energy of the universe in the area that you're in, but you're not where your body is? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I agree. It's interesting. Do you think the journey we're talking about that you guys have been on in terms of kind of the esoteric ancient stuff, do you think that kind of primes you a little bit to accept that? Because a lot of people can't get to where you are from just grinding it through logically. I like your logic, by the way. I mean, it's similar to mine. It's like, gee, as strange as this sounds, it sure sounds like a lot of other strange shit that I kind of think is true. So do you think coming from that kind of background that you had kind of makes you more open to that stuff?
Well, so here's one way that I've looked at this, and both of us, and we've talked about this quite a bit on our show, is that we have tried to take the position that all of these ancient peoples who were, in a lot of cases, constructing absolutely amazing structures, temples, whatever you want to call them, these amazing buildings, that they were brilliant people, that they knew what they were doing, right? And that they were very successful in a lot of things. In other words, we look at them as like, okay, these people, there's no reason we should have some kind of like, oh, we're modern and scientific and we can look down on these more primitive people. We try to, we don't do that, right? We think that, and we're like, you look at some of these structures, you're like, okay, whoever did that was an absolute genius and that has never been matched. So, so many of those same cultures have been so, at least the remnants of what we have left today, have been so focused on what they saw as the spirit realm or whatever it is, what happens to you after you die, that life continues, and that they have studied this, they have made a science of it, that I think does make us more, it makes it more amenable, because I look at these ancients and I'm like, they knew what they were talking about and knew what they were doing, and there's something to this. So yeah, I think it does. But I want to tell you a story, Alex. We got into a really bad car wreck. What was it?
2001.
2001. And I didn't die, okay? I was very badly wounded. I ended up being in the hospital, and then there was a huge operation on my back. I didn't die, but went into the operation, and then, of course, came out of the operation, and I was in the ICU until I woke up, right? So what happened is, this is all I can remember. I don't know if I had an NDE, but I remember when I was waking up in the ICU that the question in my head was, why am I back here? Mm. I had this, I don't remember it, but I remember remembering, if you get what I'm saying, that I had I was somewhere else living a completely different life, doing a whole bunch of other stuff. And then suddenly I'm waking up and I'm like, oh my God, this was thousands of years ago is what it felt like. Like, why am I waking up in this ancient history that I thought was long gone? So it felt like, my memory of it felt like some kind of future past life sort of thing, that part of me had left my body during that long operation and while I was in the ICU and was completely doing other stuff. And then I wake up and I'm like, why have I been dragged back into this place? So that also probably that changed the way I look at a lot of things. I always think of that, like, yes, do I live other lives in other places? I have a feeling that does happen. So,
that's really, really, really interesting. And like, I'm partially, I guess I have a foot in kind of both camps. I mean, like Kyle, I can get kind of pretty nuts and bolts. Let's get into the science, physics of it. And like, there's a couple things that you said right there, Russ, that I think relate to the science part of it that I think is interesting. Like, one of the best near-death experience researchers is a guy named Dr. Samparnia, and he's also one of the world's leading experts in resuscitation. And he had just like kind of a very interesting, almost a throwaway point. But he said, when we go to measure NDEs, we're not accounting for memory. So his point was to your thing. It's like, we're counting NDEs based on people's recollections. What if everybody's having an NDE, just not everybody's remembering it?
Right, exactly.
And that relates to the dream thing too, right? Because like when they do dream research and they go, people go, I don't dream. They go, listen, pal, everybody dreams.
Yep.
We'll hook you up to this machine and we'll show you when you're dreaming. Go, no, I don't dream. And okay, I tell you what, we'll wait until your eyes start moving like this and we'll wake you up. And they do it. And the guy goes, damn, I do dream.
I do have
it's
dreams.
Like, so, I mean, I think that's kind of part, I don't know if it fits with your story, but it could, in that we don't understand why that would work. Certainly, it doesn't seem to make sense in one way.
Right.
But maybe you have the NDE and you don't remember the NDE.
Yeah. So that's this is sort of the nuts and bolts, but maybe memory is one of the aspects of consciousness that is attached to the physical. Right?
Yes. Right. And especially if we loosen up on the term physical. This kind of where consciousness is being tuned into this thing that we have here versus out there.
Yeah,
right?
That's part of the aspect of memory, is even being able to be aware and take in the all of the inputs of the body. That has to be connected to memory in some way, and we can't keep it all. We can't store it all. But I've always thought that all of it is actually being stored in the conscious realm. Or
Akashic record style somehow.
Well, again, totally with you. That's a super interesting place to take it. So, and even beyond the Akashic records, I mean, take the, like you guys are probably familiar with the research from Gary Schwartz at University of Arizona with transplants, the bodily, so the guy, the woman she's a vegetarian yogi and she gets a heart transplant. She's like, I don't want this. I just want to drink beer and, eat pizza, and it's like, well, here's the guy who you got the heart from kind of thing.
Yep.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And so did I have an NDE? I don't know, because first of all, I don't remember it. I just remember remembering something. But what I feel like I was remembering was not an NDE, but some other life. So does that count as an NDE? I mean, like, I definitely didn't die. Right? There was no point on the operating table or in the ICU where they were like, oh my God, he's flatlined or anything like that. So,
well, but hold on right there. Cause that is not, it's kind of interesting on all these different levels, but like one thing people don't get about near-death experience research is the data we get back from science is the data because we've squeezed it through this skeptical, stupid funnel, So we kind of pounded on people because since Plato, they've been reporting near-death experiences, probably before that. And we said, no, none of those count.
Right.
You got to get it in a hospital and you got to do it this way. And they said, okay, we'll tie one hand behind her back, hop on one foot. We'll go to a cardiac arrest ward because when someone has a cardiac arrest, their heart stops, we know the physiology, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So then they start getting all that data back, and that's what they report. And the reason I bring that up is because, and I'm sure you probably know this, Russ, but people have near-death experiences when they're totally lucid. They're in a plane. They think the plane's going down.
Yes,
and all of a sudden they're boom, or they're going to be in an accident. They're driving a big rig truck and they boom, they're outside of their body and they have a full-blown near-death experience. They'll even say, I thought it lasted days, but and the past life thing is sometimes a component of that. So not saying you might be saying something different. You might be saying simultaneous lives, or you jumped in a different timeline. That's not really something I've looked at very much, but I've certainly heard it. We've all heard that. But I just throw that on the table.
Yeah, I'm not saying simultaneous. Okay. If what I feel like I remember is accurate, it seems like maybe I was connecting to something. I don't know. Like, is time really a straight line? We've talked about the arrow of time and everything. Like, once you get into the spirit realm, is time even a thing? So who knows what I was remembering, whether it happened in the future or it happened way in the past. I don't have any memories of the life itself, except that there's a kind of an indication that I had a family that I cared a lot about. I too kind of remember that I was like, oh my God, I'm going to miss these people when I came back here. Right. But so whether it was future or past, I don't think that I'm not sure if that even matters, but it does seem like it seems like there was a part of me that had said that avatar, this physical body, it's gone. They put me under for the operation, and some part of me was like, yep, this life is done. And it went on to do other things and had a whole other life that it got yanked back from. That's what I felt like. So I don't know. Is there a version of me in some future life that drops into a coma when that person gets yanked back to this one? I have no idea if there's any kind of connection across those things. But that experience was very powerful, and I've never forgotten it. That's the point. So that's the closest thing I have had to an NDE, and I always remember it whenever whenever I'm listening to your show and you're talking to people about NDEs and experiences are being reported. I'm like, okay, I kind of know what this feels like. Where I wake up and I'm like, what am I remembering? What is this memory that I'm having that has nothing to do with what's going on now? And, so I don't know. It's whether it was simultaneous or not. I don't think it matters. It just, where did that come from? And it seems to connect me to something else that is not having to do anything with this life. So.
I mean, I've never had that kind of experience, but just hearing you talk about it, it's obviously transformative. And
yeah,
what are you going to do with that? Just toss it away, and you can't.
So what do you think? You've done all this research. Now I'm turning the question back around on you. Where have you gone with this NDE stuff?
Well, I mean, I think you guys can kind of tell where I'm at there in terms of, but the reason I went to the near-death experience in the first place, because as we were chatting about at the very beginning, I just kind of started at the super basic level, which to me was parapsychology.
Okay.
Dean Radin, is telepathy possible? People report this or that, ESP. I was just like, the skeptics are crapping all over that anyway, saying that's completely impossible. These guys say, here, I have this experiment. I have this dog that knows when its owner is coming home. Rupert Sheldrake, I got way into that. And then I just reached a point and I go, okay, I see where these guys are going, but doesn't this other thing over here really kind of cut to the chase? If this consciousness, I mean, they were arguing whether consciousness exists. Well, right. If it exists after you die, that kind of answers that question about whether it's a part of your brain or not. So that's what's really my interest is it seemed like there was solid data evidence coming from these group of doctors mostly who were interested in near-death experience. So that was it. Because unlike you, I never had a near-death experience. I don't really have anyone close to me who has. I just had this interest because it seemed to me to, kind of nail that point down.
Yeah. And I know you've looked at like terminal lucidity, right? You've talked to people about this, and this is another thing that has fascinated me. How is that even possible? If somebody goes through all the stages of dementia to the point to where they don't know, they can't recognize anything in the world anymore. They don't have any memory. They don't seem to be able to connect anything they see or anyone they talk to with any memories they have of the past. They don't know any of their closest loved ones or anything like that. And then minutes before they die, suddenly they're lucid again. They can say, hey, daughter, there's a drawer in the bedroom. It's at the bottom of this dresser. That's where all the important documents are. Or they can start reciting poetry. How is this possible if their brain has degenerated in some kind of degenerative brain disease like that, and then suddenly it all comes back? Where is it coming from? So this is like going back to what you were talking about with where is memory really? How can it be stored in physical parts of the brain if they have a degenerative disease that destroys that stuff somehow, and then all of a sudden it comes back right before they perish? That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I was going to toss it over to Kyle too, because it does. It's kind of along the lines of what he's saying, is that we have this limited kind of, and again, it's because we've pushed it through this Scientism neurology funnel that clearly just doesn't explain it. So there's something else going on. We have a gut feel for it. Memory doesn't really work that way. It isn't really stored, Just, it's something we can still try and understand it. We just have to hold it really loosely because we understand enough to know what we don't know.
Yeah.
Yep. I was just going to change the subject.
Go for it.
What is intuition? What are these things that we have? You can meet somebody and within seconds you're like, okay, whoa, there's something wrong. That person is not right. Like they may be dishonest or something. And you can go and all your friends and everybody are like, oh, they're great, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, I don't know. There's something always just no way to logically explain it. And then one day they show their true face and you're like, oh man, what is that? And it seems like animals, especially dogs. I had a dog and this dog seemed to have intuition.
Yep.
As soon as I walked in the room, the dog acted in ways that felt to me like it knew what was going on with me at some level. How did it do that? Is intuition, what do you think of that?
We've had, we do a lot of foster dog thing. My wife has driven that. It's awesome. I never had a dog growing up. Never liked dogs. I like dogs now. After I'm about 60 of them run through the house. But we got a cat. And I don't know if she's in here now, but she's like my favorite cat. She really likes me.
Oh, I'm a cat person.
This cat, he's she spots the good dogs and the bad dogs. Like you get it, because these foster dogs, you know, these are like dogs from the hood down here in Southern California, you know, they're not good dogs, you know, and she will spot him like, no, that guy is not coming in. Lo and behold, the dog bites me on the hand, you know.
Oh, wow.
And the other dog should just leave it be, you know, like, okay, he's cool. And it's like, I don't know. It's interesting to me about the whole thing with animals, because I just kind of mentioned in passing that Rupert Sheldrake thing that I did. If people don't know who Rupert Sheldrake is, he's this wonderful guy, Cambridge biologist, super smart, super witty, sharp-witted, you know, British kind of tight vested, you know, tight tie kind of guy, but an assassin, man, an assassin. He is brutally honest, you know, in terms of calling shit the way that it is. And he did this really fantastic experiment years ago that I think captured the imagination of a lot of people. And it was this: dogs that know when their owners are coming home. So it's kind of related to that. But if any people haven't heard this experiment, they're going to love hearing about it, because first off, this is like back in the day for me, you know, back at the beginning of the show when I was doing it. And I was really kind of riled up by the fact that I thought this guy had done fantastic work, and he was just not getting any respect. I mean, he's getting dissed by all these people. He's published in Science, you know, the best journal. He's like Cambridge biologist, and he's just getting dissed all over the place. So he does this experiment, and he says, look, I'm a biologist. As a biologist, the first thing I do is I collect field reports. You know, people say stuff happens. In this case, people are telling me that their dog seems to be able to tell when they're coming home. And he says, and of course, in the first 5 minutes, I threw out all the, you know, I come home every day at 5 o'clock and, you know, Rusty's there waiting for me. Because of course I threw all those out. And, you know, of course I threw out that, you know, it's 1 minute before because they heard my truck down the road, threw all those out. And there were still a lot of cases that just couldn't be explained. People who come home at odd hours. People who are gone for a week and they don't know when they're going to come home, and they come home in 15 minutes before the dog has, you know, clawed its way out of the house to get there. So he does a very systematic, methodical, careful experiment, and he finds exactly that some dogs form this bond with their owner, caretaker, whatever the proper term is, and they seem to just know stuff in this mind-to-mind thing, even if we're not trying to communicate it to them. And, you know, the thing about it's like we were talking about earlier, you know, but anyone who's had a dog knows that that's true.
Right.
Knows, right?
That's right. It seems like, why would you argue with it, right? Yeah,
right.
I agree. And they argue with it because there's this paradigm. And when you're forced to face a certain thing that, like, everyone knows, from the perspective of that paradigm, you have to say no, right? That's. I mean, I've heard you say almost exactly that. That it's like, this is something that everyone, you know, everyone accepts. But when certain people that are in the scientific community are forced to look at that thing, but they have to do it from the scientific perspective, they have to say no because it doesn't fit, and they know that they won't get away with it, right?
Well, the other tricky thing about that, let me throw this on the table and see what you think, because it took me a long time to even speculate this, but I think there's something else going on. I think we're complicit in it, because I think a lot of us are doing the math and saying, you know what, if I accept that, then I'm going to have to accept this. I'm going to have to realize that guy on Sunday who's up there preaching to me really doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah. I'm going to have to realize that this that I thought was true probably isn't true. And maybe that alien show probably might be true too. And they quickly, you know, like that, do the math, and they go, nope, dogs don't know shit. You know? I mean,
yeah. Okay. You're talking about, the slippery slope problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That if I accept this one thing, suddenly that opens a floodgate of all kinds of stuff that maybe I'm not prepared to accept. Yeah. So that I agree with that. Is that what you mean? I've heard you say this so many times on your show. You say we're all playing this game. Is that what you're talking about when you say that? That a lot of people are playing a game that we've all agreed to these rules? Is that what you're talking about, or is that something else?
Man, I don't know what I was meaning when I said that. I really don't, because I think there's a bunch of different games, you know, games that we're playing and games that are being played on us, because I mean, what that brings to mind to me is like the next part of my journey, talking about the journey was really the conspiracy thing.
Yep.
And I lost a lot of people. I did. Please unsubscribe. Please do yourself a favor. Unsubscribe from Skeptiko. But when I went down this conspiracy thing, I wasn't trying to go down it. I still remember, and I've said this on the show, but I remember clearly, sitting on the little ottoman in my bedroom and going to my wife, because I had just looked into the JFK thing,
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's pretty hard to, Lee Harvey Oswald, no way was that a lone assassin thing. And but I remember going to her and just kind of shaking my head and say, okay, I get it. I go, but there's no way like that 9/11 stuff. There's no way. I mean, this was me, and maybe it was 5-7 years ago at this point, but now, I mean, I have the reverse litmus test. Anyone who doesn't, to me, isn't seriously considering, and I'm saying that as a kind of escape hatch, isn't seriously considering that 9/11 was an inside job. I mean, I'm just like, then you just haven't looked into it. There's just no other way around it. And I'd say the same thing with so many other, conspiracies that are pressing on us at the time.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I think it's it has to be factored in to all these things we're looking at. Just like when you talk about the ancient civilization thing. I mean, in a way, it kind of relates too, right? Because you run across all the conspiracies there,
Of course. Yeah.
This guy overthrows this kingdom by doing this. And, and then you go like, oh, okay, that playbook's been around for a while.
Yeah. I mean, history is a collection of stories of conspiracies. That's pretty much all it is. Conspiracies between the powerful. When you read history, that's all it is a collection of conspiracies between powerful people and how that affects everyone else, right? Rise and falls of civilization. Now, of course, sometimes there's no conspiracy involved, and the problem is that there, like a big rock comes down from space and slams into the planet, and that causes all kinds of problems. But yeah, I agree.
If in some way all of our writings, which probably mostly are digital at this point, if somehow they're preserved for future archaeologists to discover and decipher, there's going to be so much information in there that it's going to be really hard to weed out who were the powerful writing what. You know what I'm saying?
That's
There's just so much stuff written. And we kind of have that situation in ancient Sumer. It's like you're digging up this pile of tablets and you finally start deciphering them, and they're receipts.
Yeah.
What?
Hundreds of thousands of receipts of selling sheep for something, and you're just like, okay, where's the good stuff?
The number of vases of wheat we stored in the winter.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, it's all bureaucratic crap. But yeah, so I agree that the conspiracy thing is, and there are so many that you just can't dive down all the conspiracy. You just can't do it, But I agree that, like, for example, with the 9/11 thing, there's just the official story doesn't really work, and there's something weird about it. And we've talked about it between us many times. We've had our dad in here because he's a builder. He's built many high-rise buildings, so we've talked to him about how the buildings could fall. I remember you talking about, like, there's this guy that's just put out this 1,000-page book and it doesn't even mention Building 7. I'm just like, okay, how can these weird things about these kinds of conspiracies just sort of disappear from the mainstream view of stuff?
What did your dad think about, that famous, there's like in conspiracy circles, there's this famous video they took a film of the Building 7 collapse and they showed it to this guy in Europe who did demolition and wasn't really familiar with it. And he looks at it and he just nods his head. He goes, yeah, controlled demolition. He goes, no, that's the building, Building 7, the World Trade Center.
Right.
And he looks at me, he goes, no, controlled demolition. What did your dad think, or what does he think when he sees that Building 7 did? Does he go controlled demolition?
Nope. He doesn't like the building style. Actually, there's I can't remember what it was called, but there's what?
With Building 7, he said there's something wrong.
Oh, okay.
He says the two big towers, the way they come down, he explained
Okay, that's what I was thinking you were doing.
Right.
The
No,
towers.
Building 7 is the one that should not have fallen. That did.
Okay.
Yeah.
My bad. Sorry, Dad.
No, I was just going to wonder because I don't know that stuff, but so I'm taking it secondhand what people tell me. But I mean, it's just the way it pitches on the top for an instant,
Right? Yeah.
And then it falls at free fall, and the whole thing falls into its footprint, And I just kind of accept as faith, and people go, yeah, it doesn't do that if it's just kind of toppling over, So.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, Dad had a great explanation for why the towers themselves would have collapsed the way they did. But yeah, he was like, I don't know what was going on with Building 7. There's something wrong with that. That he's like, I don't have any explanation for that. Is what his story was. And we all kind of agree that we don't know what happened there, but that the standard story is not the right story. There's something weird going on with that. So
which often, people get hung up on that too. It's like, that's monumental. I mean, like that's all you have to say is, the way I always put it is the burden of proof shifts, so the burden of proof now shifts from some wacky conspiracy guy proving that it's true to, no, you got to tell us why you didn't release the NIST report.
Yeah.
You got to tell us why you orchestrated the removal of all the material immediately after while it was still molten metal.
Yeah.
The burden of proof is on you. You have to explain why things were done that way. Or like, I think the spiritual part is where I kind of wind up in my journey. And it's like, I think the religion part, and I do want to hear more about your guys' story because that really does intrigue me, and I want to know where you guys are coming from on that. But it's like I always say that about the Catholic Church. It's like, okay, whatever you think about the systematic, organized sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, I think any reasonable person would say the burden of proof is that on that institution to show that it is not systematic torture and molestation of kids. You have to come outside of that shadow. We don't have to keep mounting up the evidence, another 100 priests in Pittsburgh, need to go to jail. No, it's enough. If we were just in any kind of situation where someone held that kind of responsibility in our culture and then abused it, we would run them up, it would not be pretty. So the burden of proof is kind of where I land on a lot of that stuff. But so you guys, I mean, what has been the religious experience that you guys had? I mean, like we're talking about, your homeschool, that's unique. The other interesting thing about that, I just had to pick up on this, which is kind of what does it say about our educational system, Kyle, that you're like, yeah, my mom never started me on school. I was quote unquote 4 grades back, but I made it up pretty quick. Once she started throwing some books my way, it's like, when your kids get older, you'll see this, it's like, they're just wasting time in there. They're not doing anything. It's the most inefficient process in the world, I mean, but what about the Christian part of that?
Well, for me personally, I really loved the whole Christian upbringing. Obviously, I didn't have anything to compare it to, but I loved the stories. And my mom is a very spiritual person and kind of, coached me in prayer when I was a child, which was, the way I look at it now, it's like it was a way of meditating, calming the mind, opening up to and speaking to a higher being, right? Very simple for a child. And of course, being told that all of the stories and just the idea in general that there is more to this existence than what meets the eye, I still keep that, that's still part of me. And I would say part of this journey, for our journey, Russ and I, in the podcast and looking into all these ancient cultures and looking at our modern society and what we have received from our ancestors, which is, interestingly enough, what all of these religious institutions are based on, these ancient texts. You know, there was a period where, after having learned so much and read so many different ancient texts and looked at all of these different possibilities and the ancient aliens question and all of that stuff, that the basic Christian idea that there's a big bearded guy, that's looking after all of us, and that there was this story about a fight between him and the evil guy, and they're all fighting for our souls and stuff. You know, that was all just kind of wiped out. And I didn't know what else was wiped out either at the time. So there was a period where I seriously was like, okay, where is my spirituality now? Right? Now that all of these images that had been built up as this is this person and this is God and this is, it's like all of that. And those are physical, in a way, physical representations, right? It's an image of a being that I can keep in my mind, and that's God. And then here's his son, and here's the story that they had. And this is all ancient text now. But what was that spiritual stuff that I actually felt all my life, all the way through my childhood? And, it's like, do I still have that? So it's like I went through a period of materialism, right? Unintended. I was studying physics and all this kind of stuff and realizing at some point, like, okay, where is my spirituality now? And I believe that it's still there. I have it back. It's different because I have now removed all of the things that I added to it that weren't it. So now it's very different and subtle, but still at times, like, I feel something very powerful, and it's beyond anything that makes sense in terms of physics.
Can I ask you this? Because this is what I was getting at with my experience, and you touched on it too. So you had this indoctrination, and there were some really great things about it. And it also sounds like, maybe you can tell me, but the transmission between you and your mom is really cool, so it's not just, Homer Simpson, do whatever you want all weekend and then pile the kids in for 1 hour. You know what I mean? It
Right.
was like this ongoing connection with this spiritually tuned person who was your mother,
Yes.
which has got to be fantastic in terms of that. But there is this kind of flip for, a lot of us when we get to that other side and we go, you mean that wasn't true? You mean, it's another Santa story?
Right.
That's still hard to deal with,
Well,
Yeah. I just say that one of the things that I enjoy doing now is looking at some of these ancient texts and finding the aspects of them that actually help heighten, your spiritual awareness. They are there. And it's as though they did have some knowledge of this and some way to transmit that understanding throughout the ages. Like I just, one of the ones that I'm thinking of is the Egyptians, for example. What is this obsession with death? It's this afterlife idea, and they were kind of working on it like it was a scientific experiment over time, to where they were developing, here's how you can actually achieve the best situation after you die. It also looks like in almost every case, whatever they did discover is, once again, over time, there's a lot of people, scholars, whatever, adding all this stuff onto it that isn't true, that's not right. These are not the things you have to do to become more spiritually active or aware or whatever. So it is like a battle. There's this battle going on and we see it today with the scientific community versus anything spiritual or extra physical. They're like, no, none of that exists, right? No matter what evidence exists out there. There's this constant battle and that almost seems like a conspiracy in and of itself, to keep us from becoming aware of what we actually are. And that is a very prominent theme in Christianity. You know, one of the things that Jesus said, for example, when he was dying on the cross, he's like talking to God and he's saying, it's not their fault. They have no idea what they're doing. And that's that basic idea. We're still walking around having no idea.
Yeah. And I also think that I don't know if I ever went, me personally, when, you know, going down the journey that we've gone down, I'm not sure I ever went over to atheism or pure materialism. That just never really happened. Like Kyle said, there was a kind of an erasure, an erasing of a whole bunch of symbols and objects and ideas that were on top of spiritual stuff that had been built in from a Christian upbringing or whatever. And also being a child and being taught very complicated esoteric texts like the Bible, you just build sort of childlike images of things in your head. You know, you're like, yeah, Samson, you know, big strong guy, cut his hair off, got weak. You know, there's just no concept in a small child looking at Bible stories that these are metaphors or, you know, whatever it is that is happening in esoteric texts. This is like this with all esoteric texts. You just take the face value and you're like, all right. So you have to get rid of those images. And so often what kind of, you know, what kind of amuses me sometimes about when I've interacted with people who are professing to be that are professing to be atheists, like I talk to them online, and I'm like, okay, what you're arguing against are your kid pictures of religion. They've never gone past having this, you know, they're like, oh yeah, the bearded guy in the sky. I'm like, yeah, that's what kids think. No serious spiritual or religious scholar thinks there's a bearded guy in the sky, right? You're arguing against a straw man that you built when you were a kid. Like, so I think that erasing those images is one thing that happens. And I never lost the idea that there was something more, you know? So I'd say that the biggest thing that,
I would agree with that.
Right. The biggest thing that I took away from the religious quote unquote Christian upbringing was that this realm, this world that we see and we're interacting with is not all there is. That's the main thing that has always stuck with me is just what that actually means and how much I might think I know about that has drastically changed. And it's the amount I think I know about it has gone way down. Now I understand that I know almost nothing about what's really happening. And that means that we can ask questions like you ask, which is why I love your show, which is why I wanted to get you on our show, because I'm like, this is the kind of question you start asking when you start realizing that we don't know what's going on. Right. And that's the freedom of, we have this joke on our show about certificates of ignorance, right? We're like, you know, well, all we do here is everybody has a certificate of ignorance and you have to print your own yourself. And that joke is basically, but it's also serious. The acknowledgement of the fact that we don't know something frees you up to start asking real good questions about those topics.
Yeah, that's really cool. You know, one of the things, Russ, and I kind of sent you this book I'm working on, and it's ever expanding. You know, because every time I talk to somebody like you guys, I'm like, I gotta mention that. That's a good point. But it's mainly about this kind of journey I've been on, and these interviews and stuff like that. But I do have a couple of conclusions.
Okay,
and one of the conclusions is what you just said. We are more.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we ever got peddled this idea that we're, you know, biological robots in a meaningless universe, which is how I sum up what science is telling us, what they're going to drill into your kids, Kyle. If you allow them to go to public school, from the time they get there, they'll be forced to, you know, repeat that just like they were in Sunday school. And it's just not true. That's right.
We are biological robots in a meaningless universe.
That's it. And it's just not true. It's just not true. It's not true philosophically. It's not true if we look at cultures as far back as you guys have, and it isn't true scientifically either. So we are more. And, you know, the other conclusion, I'll just lay it out there because I think we've also touched on it. My other conclusion is we are good. You know, innately, there is a divine spark in us. And, I'm looking at evil, and I'm looking at satanic ritual abuse, and it's real, and that's happening. And looking at other aspects of, what these malevolent spiritual forces are doing and trying to understand that. But at the end of the day, we're good. We have the ability to get past that, to transcend it, to be more than that. And again, it's one of those things like we talked about overall from the beginning is, as soon as you say that, you guys are like nodding your head. You're like, yeah, I know. I do have the ability to choose good, to choose the right thing, to be a good dad, to be a good friend, to be a good son. I know when I do it, I feel it, and I don't always do it,
right?
but I know I can.
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. That's one of the things I've been listening to recently on your show. And I had a couple of thoughts about that I wanted to run by you. This idea of, I don't know if it's evil or the nature of evil, but there seems to be something you touched on with suffering. And we've talked about this a few times on our podcast. There's something, and this is also in a lot of ancient texts, Christian traditions as well, that suffering somehow it aids in the ability of the human, of our ability to sort of grow up in a way spiritually. I don't know what it is, but it's like, I don't know what I'm trying to describe here.
Like on the one hand, suffering seems to be, for the most part, something that results from evil in some way or another. A lot of times, it doesn't always mean that, right? So but a lot of human suffering results from other humans not doing good, right?
Well, let's just take the fasting idea, for example. It's like you put yourself in a situation where you've decided you're going to suffer. And through that suffering, you somehow become enlightened, spiritually enlightened in some way. And
ascetics do this too, yeah.
See, I mean, that is one of those things that I put in that category, I don't know. And I'm suspicious of it. When I say I don't know, I'm kind of suspicious of it because I kind of see it being used as a way to kind of deceive and a way to trick. And I also, it just strikes me as one of those things that they could have kind of misunderstood, like you're talking about before, and kind of worked it in there the wrong way, like Friar Joe, had this great thing. And he said, Joe, he's like, I haven't eaten for a week. And they, okay, everybody don't eat for a week and see if you see it. And it's like, well, it didn't have anything to do with it, but we do that because here's a counter hypothesis, working hypothesis. And it's not generally what I'm about. I'm about just kind of trying to follow the data, the best I can. But we all form our opinions, and I'll share one, and that's that, man, we inadvertently create all the suffering we need.
Right.
That's not the problem. The problem is somehow dealing with the traumas, the big traumas and the little freaking traumas. Last couple of times I said, because I love one of my spiritual mentors tells this little story, but we can all relate to it. You're driving along, you're a teenager, and damn it, man, that's my girl.
Oh yeah.
What is she doing in that car with that dude? And you drive past and you're like, boom, you're at 100. All of a sudden, your blood's in, you're pumping and you're, the whole thing. Well, you're creating all that stuff inside of you, right?
Yeah.
And it because you're driving down the road and you see another one of those cheesy Firebirds just like that one, and without even anyone being in it, you see that Firebird and you're there,
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that next week you find out it wasn't even her.
Right.
And it wasn't even that guy. You still got it in you that Firebird,
Yep.
I think we create enough suffering, enough trauma just by doing our regular stuff, or just trying to get the stuff that we think we need, like we've all been there. We've all done stuff that probably isn't the greatest stuff, but at the time it's what we want. So,
okay,
the suffering thing, I just kind of look at I don't know if that's a necessary part that we need to, if suffering is good,
I see that as a good point. Why then is it so hard to do the right thing all the time? It's like, it seems like, okay, doing the right thing is like it takes more time and effort and it's harder. Doing whatever I want is like way easier. But it's like when you choose to just do whatever you want and not care and whatever, you can end up in a really bad suffering situation by simply pursuing the pleasures of right now. Whereas if you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really, obviously it's a really deep question. It's this do what thou wilt, Aleister Crowley magic kind of ethos that gets pumped into. You guys have been in the music business.
Yeah.
Man, it's all over that. It's all over now it's exploded in the film business when we find out, what all this kind of satanic stuff that's worked in there. What does that even mean? We're talking about the Christian thing. And then if you go look historically at Satan, Satan kind of disappears. I mean, he doesn't just kind of, historically, he's not in the really old Jewish text. He's in kind of the old, but not really old Jewish text. So what's going on there? There wasn't even that Satan thing. And then it pops up. But the real question is a deep one. I do not have an answer. I mean, I definitely have a sense for that. I'm a guy. I grew up and had that drive to do all sorts of stuff that I wanted to do. And the one thing I guess I just throw in there, I don't know if it answers it, is I think there's a lot of leeway between figuring out what the right thing to do is and doing evil shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doing evil shit is crushing somebody's soul, is intentionally trying to inflict that soul level abuse on someone. Just smiling your smile at that girl across the bar. That ain't evil, man. That's just doing your thing,
That's a great answer. You're right. There is a difference between evil and maybe not doing the right thing, right? That I do agree with that. It's kind
That's a good point.
That evil is it has its own category that maybe aside from like right and wrong in a sense, I don't know if that's the right way to say it. Maybe I didn't do the right thing in some case, but that doesn't mean I was doing something evil, right? I guess is what way to put it.
Well, the other stumbling block I'm running into as I talk to people about this topic is people want to quantify it. And they go, you're so hung up on this satanic ritual abuse. What about the carpet bombing of Japan? Yeah,
I heard that.
No, seriously, that's horrible. What about Obama's drone strikes of the wedding party, that we all saw in Yemen? Yeah, it's terrible. I always throw Obama in there. Now, I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not an Obama supporter. I'm apolitical. But people forget that the drone strike king was the last guy.
That's right.
Not that this guy's done any better or the guy before him, but that's just the fact there. You got to deal with it. But the point being that quantifying evil misses the point because we are on our own spiritual kind of thing. It's not like we're scoring points in a video game and our team USA is rallied against. It's like, no, dude, how is that going to affect you and what you did? And, you're making those decisions. So that's what I think. And again, because people are going to think I'm all airy-fairy, and I'm not. Like, one of the things that really has affected me deeply is this interview I did, and it's going to be an interview series because the guy's so phenomenal. But it's this clinical psychologist. His name is Dr. Tom Zinzer, and he practiced for 30 years in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Guy has, great credentials, PhD, Texas A&M, worked in the state hospital, then went into private practice, got into working with people with dissociation disorders, like split personality stuff, but there's a whole range of things that happen. And his story is amazing because one day, and I always like the precursor to the story is Tom says, I was like at the end of my rope in terms of career. I was like, this isn't working. No one's getting better. I'm just seeing these people and I'm doing hypnosis with them and I'm trying to get them to feel better and they're not. This woman, part-time secretary, he barely knows her, comes up to him in the break room and says, "Hey, I heard you talking about Monroe Institute, out-of-body experience." She goes, "I got to tell you, I have been having this contact with this spirit, and I think this spirit needs to talk to you." So Tom, again, he's a clinical psychologist. He's straight-laced doing it, but he's open. He's on the edges. He's out-of-body experience. Let's see it. Let's have it. And that's how he is. He's like, "All right, let's talk to Jared, your spirit, and see what's up with that." Jared starts giving him specific advice about his clients. And it's about their ego states, like their split personalities. Like, oh, that part of that person is being obstructed by a past life memory that is working into, almost like your idea, Kyle, of the kind of separate memory. We'll take that. And if now there's this kind of part of your consciousness that breaks off into this ego state, and that is somehow more vulnerable to interference from this other radio station or maybe this other entity. And he's dealing, now check this out. Maybe you've heard this, which is super scary, but we kind of hear it too much to be true. Like the MK Ultra, our wonderful government, actually weaponized this splitting of personalities.
Yep.
And they said, let's take these little kids and let's put them in these cages. Let's even sexually abuse them because boom, they split. And when they split, we can now maybe penetrate that split in a way and do some crazy ass psychic stuff. So this is mind-blowing on one hand, and on another hand, it kind of fits into a lot of these pieces that you hear because satanic ritual abuse cults are also known to have done this, to intentionally try and manufacture this or enhance this splitting, this creating of an ego state within someone's consciousness. I say that realizing that I really have no idea what I'm talking about. I don't know what it means to create a different ego state in a consciousness, but these are maybe terms that we're going to have to try to come to grips with if we want to try and understand this to the same level that we can now say these things about near-death experience, even though we don't really know what's going on. We at least go, oh, that's a life review, and here's kind of how that works. I think that's where we need to get with some of this evil stuff, to the point of saying, oh, okay, well, that means that your ego state then can be penetrated by this demon.
Yeah.
It's crazy stuff, but that's where I've, please unsubscribe. Please unsubscribe.
Well, first of all, I would start, you had a lot of stuff in that, but I would start with saying that I don't see why we should think that that this extended consciousness realm or the spirit realm or whatever you want to call it is any less complex than the world that we exist in now, which is so complicated. You see sacred geometry, you see that there seem to be fundamental design aspects to this physical or material realm, whatever that means. But at the same time, those little, there's a couple of numbers down there at the bottom at the fundamentals of this universe that result in this enormously beautiful and complicated thing. So why shouldn't the other realm be like that? And yes, if we try to think of it as just it's simple, then we're going to misunderstand it. There's no reason why it should be any less complicated and chaotic than this one.
And if the human body, and just let's not worry about the animals right now, but if humans are somehow linked to that other world through our consciousnesses, then it would be like part of, the tool is in both worlds. So if I manipulate this part of it, then this part of it over here and the other side changes a little bit. So it is a way, as terrible as this sounds, to experiment with what's going on in the other world. And I don't know if have you ever read a book called The Gods of Eden by William Bramley?
Oh, you know what? I through you guys.
Okay.
Listen to parts of it on your 6-part.
Yeah.
Talking about deep dive, your 6-part series.
So it's weird because there's a some people dispute whether the translations are correct, but the idea is this story comes from Sumer, where the gods basically they were aware of their spiritual, they're fully aware of their spiritual beings and that they could inhabit physical beings but still be free spiritually. And so they took one of the spirits and they broke it into a bunch of pieces and they combined it with clay to make the Adamu. It's like, that's what that reminds me of, the stuff that you're talking about, you know, it's breaking this,
fragmenting the spirit on purpose. Yeah.
so that you could make puppets to do what you want.
Right.
basically.
To entrap people into certain,
See, and that's where I jump in there and like tying it back to what we were saying earlier. It's like, on one hand, I'm open to that. On the other hand, I'm open to that being, I don't want to say complete misinterpretation, but you know, the same kind of thing of Friar Joe, you know, waking up and say, okay, everybody start fasting, you know?
Right.
Friar Joe.
Same here.
Yeah.
So it's a yes, I totally agree with that. But that's just what it reminded me of. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
it's a great connection. I think it's a
whether or
definitely.
not these satanic cults that are practicing these things, trying to split or MK Ultra, whoever it is, trying to manipulate and split people's personalities in order to be able to gain control of them in some way, sounds so much like what's apparently in these ancient texts.
Yeah.
And so, you know, was it a mistranslation and it's still being mistranslated by the people doing these experiments today? This is how sort of this weird occult knowledge or these practices have come down to us, because they didn't start yesterday.
Right.
Good point.
These practices
Are as old as these texts.
They go way back into obscurity. Like nobody really knows where some of these things came from.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I almost, you know, because there's a couple different ways to spin what we're saying here. One is to say, oh, it's a mistranslation. And kind of like you guys are saying, I think you made this point, Russ, to assume that these people were lesser than us, you know, is a really dangerous, you know, probably a lot smarter than us. It's like when you read Shakespeare and you go, I don't know anyone who can write like that, you know?
Yeah.
So there's one thing is to say that, oh, they were dumb and they got it wrong. But it's another thing to say, oh, I see how that experience can be interpreted multiple ways in the same way that, you know, I have on the guy who had a near-death experience after being stung by a boxfish like 7 times and should have been dead 7 times over, and has this incredible experience with Jesus. And he says, that's it. All near-death experiences are Jesus. And I'm going around the world and going to churches and telling everyone that if you didn't have Jesus in your near-death experience, well, probably it must have been the devil in there, because all the real near-death experiences, this guy's not a stupid guy. You know, I talked to him. He's written a book. He's articulate. That was his take from his experience. I think the evidence suggests that he might not have it right, but you know, if he wrote, like your point, you know, like when they dig up all the archaeology, if his book pops up, you know, on the top, they're going to go, God, that's what everybody thought back then, you know?
And so what do you think, like, I can't remember if you asked him this or not, but what do you think he would have thought if it was Buddha in his near-death experience? Do you think he would have done the same thing? Or did he have a, you know, coming from a more Western perspective, he was more inclined to like the Jesus thing, you know? What would he have done if it was Buddha? Or,
you know, one of the interesting guys I talked to is a guy named Dr. Gregory Shushan, who did cross-culture, cross-time near-death experience. So he goes and he digs up all these near-death experiences, like from these Native American people who write them hundreds of years ago. Then he goes over to China and he looks at those. So he looks at and all these different cultures that didn't even have contact. And he starts looking at similarities and differences and stuff like that. So to me, you know, that's the data that I shove at people like that and go, well, you know, that this is the best we have in our stumbly bumbly science is to say cross culture, cross time. You kind of weed out a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
and here
symbols.
this stuff is still popping up.
Right. Yeah. There are images that are in there that you can kind of weed out because there are basic ideas that seem to remain the same across all the accounts. I agree. Like we look at the flood myths like that. Right. A lot of myths and legends are like that. Once you get enough of them from enough cultures, you're like, okay, they have so many similarities, and you can get rid of the names and the, whatever, like with the flood, okay, maybe his name wasn't Noah, and maybe it wasn't this or that, and maybe he wasn't from here or there, but there's this similar story that has all these basic elements the same all across these cultures. And it's the same way with the cross-cultural NDEs, and I think that's fascinating. I also wanted to ask you,
hold it, but then you get the Randall, like, I love what you guys, because you guys did this whole thing. I thought it was so great. Then you get Randall Carlson on, and you go, oh, shit, they weren't myths after all.
Right.
They really did happen.
Yeah, wait a minute. They're actually there's really a flood going on here. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What did you, okay, so that conversation you had with that doctor, the clinical psychologist, you began to talk to to Jared, this channeled spirit. Did you see the connections there with Ed? I thought of Edgar Casey this whole time I was listening to that interview. I was like, wow, this is so familiar. Like, okay, Casey was doing it himself, but he had a hospital for a while where he was basically doing medical treatments on people that came from channeled entities that were coming to him while he was asleep, Yeah.
Well, the thing I always remember about Casey and his stories, if anyone doesn't know, but he would, when was it? Like turn of the century, 1900 or something?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, it was a while back, yeah.
And he'd get these letters in, and people would say, oh, my dad, he's, has this condition, this and that. And Casey would send it back, say, there's a drugstore 7 miles down the road in front of your house to the right. Yeah. Go there, and the third shelf in the back, the guy hasn't dusted it very well. Put behind the, yeah. This is what you'll find. Bring him that medicine. And go, and this is specific, pretty specific stuff. And that would heal the guy, kind of thing.
Yeah.
We were talking about, we don't know. I mean, we tell these stories to each other. We don't have a clue what's going on.
Right. Yeah.
Is Jared, I am extremely skeptical. Let me frame that up this way. I'm extremely skeptical of channeled information in general, because we've all been down that path, and it gets really weird, and it gets all over the board, and it's all very susceptible to kind of this cultish crap that everyone gets into. And there's also there's evidently these spirits like to mess with people, because they'll lead them in and they'll give them a lot of good info. They're like disinfo agents, again, as below, so above kind of thing. Right. They're like disinfo agents. They'll win their confidence by telling them 9 good things, and then they'll tell them one totally wacky thing that throws off it
ruins their whole life.
Yeah, ruins their whole life. So I'm very skeptical. What I appreciate and what I really pull out of that is Tom Zinzer. And I think psychology, in particular clinical psychology done right, is maybe somewhat of a path going forward in terms of how we can do this in a, I say, pre-scientific way, methodical, try and get the result, maybe get something that we can call, meaningful out of that. I don't know. I mean, what is the process? We're both on these kind of truth seeking. What is the process? How do we sift through this stuff? Or is it all just kind of a fool's game to even think we're going to get to some answers?
I don't know. This is one of the things I was thinking of a while back while y'all were talking was one of these ideas we discuss quite often, the idea of technology and the advancement of technology. When you're looking at ancient cultures, and I'll just use Egypt as an example, you can obviously see from the things that they built that they had developed quite a bit of good technology. And then if the scholars are right in their interpretations of the writings and the spiritual aspects, it looks like in some cases they were developing their spiritual aspects as a type of technology.
Yep.
And so we've discussed this possibility that civilizations in the past may have gone down a path of technological advancement where they didn't see a difference. Our technological advancement seems to have split somewhere, and there's this, and you can kind of look back and see the sort of political forces or various forces that kind of pushed the spiritual away from the material and separated these two, and science is over here and all this over here is just BS. That doesn't necessarily have to happen. And so it's possible, or is it possible, that a civilization could begin their technological advancement never separating those two, and so make advancements in a way that just beyond our ability to imagine at this point, because we're conditioned by our own development.
Have you guys heard of the soul phone that Gary Schwartz is developing at University of Arizona?
No. Soul phones.
Soul phone. Tell us.
Do they have soul phone towers?
Soul phone. Gary Schwartz, interesting guy. I mean, talk about credentials, like PhD from Harvard, and then head of the Harvard psychiatry department and the Yale psychiatry and psychology department. Really smart guy. Goes to University of Arizona, has his own little fiefdom there that he builds, and he's the first guy who begins looking into after-death communication. He goes on Geraldo Rivera. Geraldo Rivera does the whole, gotcha thing. Yeah. Totally nails him because he had kind of accepted or asked for a donation from one of the parents, grieving parents kind of thing. Partially true, partially spun, the guy fell into a trap. So he kind of took a little step back and has been out of the limelight for a while. But he's starting to make a little bit of a comeback with this thing of exactly the kind of thing you're talking about. If there are these, so again, he's back to the after-death communication, these disembodied spirits of the dead, your dead relatives, they care about you, they want to connect with you. Let's put a photon beam there and let's ask these yes-no questions and see if they can disrupt the pattern of the photon, highly sensitive, boom. And he's saying, he says results off the charts. I haven't talked to him yet. I'll tell you my opinion on this in a second. But it's like, your point is extremely important. I mean, it's super duper important. It's like we do have this natural bias, prejudice that no, these things can't go together. Technology and spirituality. No, we have to keep them separate, and I even go there. I go, tell me another place where, God needs our help. God says, I'm really trying to communicate with you guys. I just can't get through. Give me that soul phone, It's like, there's something about that just doesn't square. But you have this other side of it. And I love that you bring it from a, again, cross-culture, cross-time thing. They go, they seem to be pretty intent on doing that same thing. So I don't have an answer, but I think it's a super insightful and important, questions, relationship between this stuff and technology. And then ET really brings that to the fore, right? Because ET, we get the sense that they have a technological edge on us, they the craft, if nothing else. But then all this other stuff, and they seem to be playing in that territory, right? With the mental phenomenon, and then the whole thing is very playing around with this in a technological kind of way. So I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, and it's it is hard to pull apart the ET thing because, like Jacques Vallée says, it's not all one or the other. But you can't ignore that the fact that it has aspects of both. That it seems to be immaterial, but also material at some times. That there are aspects of consciousness involved. But that at the same time it'll leave physical evidence. So it's.
Yeah, but I just always wonder when people say that to me, it always sounds like they're preheating me up to say, ET isn't real, in the sense that we think it is. They're not green men from spaceships and stuff like that. I talked to Vallée. He's not pissing on the idea that there's some green men from spaceships that come down here.
No, he's not.
He's just saying maybe that's not the whole thing.
Right.
Well, heck, I don't think anyone ever thought it was the whole thing. So I just don't like the using valet for people to, weasel out of the grays, because
Right.
the best evidence we have is the grays are here and they flew here on a ship, and we don't know we don't know if they came from just underground or the neighborhood or what. I'll leave all that. I mean, it's just that if you just stop there and say, that to me seems pretty well attested to in the way that we look at it. And then, like you were alluding to, Valet is still picking up the slag out there and going, wow, this is a material we can't possibly make on Earth at this time, with its layers. And then you got Diana Walsh-Pasulka out there with, Tyler Durden, code name, in the desert, more space junk that is way beyond our capability. I mean, you can't just step over that evidence and then say, well, yeah, maybe they're just, it's like, yeah, maybe, but the simplest answer at this point is that they're advanced technology and they seem to be coming from another place. Because, again, you guys are the ancient cultures stuff. And who is the guy who studied the Dogon in
Laird
Africa?
Scranton.
Laird Scranton. I mean, how do you get away from these people that they've just, well, we can go into that in a minute, that they don't have a written language, but that's actually a plus because it doesn't lead to the distortion of it. But they go, yeah, I mean, right there, that star right there, that's where they come from. It's like,
not what you can see, but there's a little bitty tiny one, that you can't see.
Tell that story. That's a great story for anyone. Your audience has probably heard it, but
that there is evidence that the Dogon people knew about basically Sirius B, which is not a visible star. And how would you know about this?
It's a twin star. It's a twin star that you don't know until you get a telescope 100 years later.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that they knew about this, and that there's even symbols and aspects of their traditions that may be representations of how these stars orbit each other. They were able to describe what one star is like versus the other. Yes. So there is. How do they get this information? And they seem to tell us, well, was it the Nomo? What were they called?
I can't remember.
The people that came and told them. Yeah. So I agree. So, but let's go back before we go into that. Let's go back to this ET thing. I wasn't bringing up ballet to try to sort of skate out of what you were saying about aliens. What I was trying to point out is that it's more complicated than they just flew here in ships. That's what seems to be fascinating to me. So I can't fall on either side of the line because I don't think that there is one. In other words, is what I'm saying.
I totally agree with you, and I think I love the way you put it there at the end, Russ. Is that there isn't the line,
right?
And we've been kind of trained to think that there is the line,
right? And
there isn't. Well, we keep saying either or. It's super complex. So no, I wasn't trying to.
Whatever. Come on, you were trashing me. You were completely trashing me.
All right, it's in my nature.
Yeah, you went full Skeptiko on me, man. Yeah. So what I was trying to say is that the just like this, a lot of this other phenomena that we look at, it's more complicated than these simple stories make it, and I feel like that the best way to look at it is to start out by saying I have no idea what I'm looking at, because that allows you to see that there isn't, I don't have to pick between a nuts and bolts craft and some pure consciousness thing. Because like you say, follow the data, and the data seems to say that whatever's happening in humans' interactions with things we call UFOs and or aliens and all that kind of stuff, it merges. There are no lines. It fades off into one side. Oh, there's all this consciousness, spiritual stuff, and then over here we're looking at it. Over here it looks like aliens and everything, but it's actually part of the same phenomena, or it's multiple things we haven't been able to pull apart yet because we don't have a full understanding of the phenomena yet. Yeah,
except the abductions are kind of fall into a different category if you buy into that.
Yeah,
and I kind of do, because it just starts looking. I mean, that kind of takes it. I agree with everything you're saying. I pull back on my skeptical, but
don't hurt me.
But I do think the abductions kind of, there's a soul crushing aspect to the abductions that isn't isn't totally resolvable in a lot of the love and light folks.
That's right.
On the ET thing. And I've gone down that path. You know, I was really welcoming of the free people and Ray Hernandez and Grant Cameron. And I'm starting to feel like they've really missed an important aspect of this. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, there's gray area, perhaps in their motives.
Gray areas with the grays.
Yeah. I mean, are they good or bad? This is one of the questions we asked ourselves long ago in reference to, these ancient stories about the Nephilim or something that came down from heaven and took the daughters of men to be their wives and blah, 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 blah. And we're like, okay, are these guys bad guys? Are they good guys? And you start to try to follow the trail of what they did. And, I remember Russ telling me like, man, I think there's just a lot of gray area. There could be good ones and bad ones and neutral ones. And
sometimes,
why should they all be one or the other? That doesn't make any sense, actually.
Yeah.
Totally.
And sometimes the good ones do bad things, and
yep.
They act like us. I'm also really skeptical, or I'm very wary of they're going to come down here and save us all kind of that makes me very suspicious, because I'm like, wow, what a great way to control people if that's your goal. Oh yeah, we're going to save you. I was talking to people. We have a Discord chat. I was talking to some of the listeners in the chat, and one guy was like, when I look at that kind of thing, you go from the contactee, quote unquote contactee era towards the abduction era, and he's like, it seems like whatever the person was inclined to believe, they just reinforced that. If you thought that humans were destroying the planet and that needed to be stopped, the aliens were like, yes, you're destroying the planet and we're going to help that be stopped. And they just, whatever it was that you wanted them to be doing is what they told you they would be doing. Or when you get further into the abduction era, it's more sinister in some ways. And I don't understand what that change is. Like, why was the contactee era seemed like, it's like these Nordic people coming down and saying, yeah, we're from Venus. Right. And then later they look a lot more alien and they're from Zeta Reticuli or something. And is this the same phenomena? Or is something new happening? Has the planet been sold to another star system? But, are we owned by somebody else now? I mean, what's happening here?
I don't know, but I totally get your questions. I think that's why the UFO field, I kind of dabbled into it a little bit, but I've always tried to maintain the consciousness angle, because I think that's the angle that hasn't been, fully explored. And in particular, I think we started out talking about, actually we never even got it on the air, but we're probably running out of airtime here, but the remote viewing thing. And, you were like, wow, let's do remote viewing. And it's like, you look at the history of that, and it's weirdly tied to a lot of this ET contact, mental phenomenon, and potentially dark kind of MK Often kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't know if I want to put my hands on that Ouija board or not.
Yeah. But dang it. Wouldn't it be awesome to be able to do it?
Of course, we immediately started talking about how can we find all these ancient sites,
Yeah. I learn how to...
That's one of the things that it seems to be kind of pretty accurate at doing.
Yeah.
Because there's a certain mass to it, and then it has that long timeline. So, if you are bouncing around on a timeline in some way you don't understand, it don't matter so much because,
it's been there for thousands of years. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we just started asking each other questions. So we watched, so the audience knows, we watched Third Eye Spies, which I heard about by listening to Skeptiko. So Kyle and I watched it. And after the documentary was over, it was excellent. After the documentary was over, we started talking about, well, what would this mean to learn this? Because the documentary and most of the stuff you read that I've read or seen about remote viewing is all from the perspective of some kind of spook crap, like they're spying on you. You know, it's like, I'm like, you're doing the most boring possible thing. You know, why? I don't care about some Russian satellite installation. I want to know, where are the pyramids in Antarctica or whatever, you know, like. So we started talking about it, you know, since time doesn't seem to be a factor. Well, could we, if I learned how to remote view, could I somehow remote view the mind of somebody who was in the process of writing down some of these mysterious ancient texts, so I could actually get from his mind what that text meant to him? Is that even a thing that could be done? You know, like what?
Well, yeah, no, I just Googled remote view archaeology because I'm almost sure the guy's name is Schwartz. I've interviewed him. Yeah, Schwartz. What's his first name though? Stephen Schwartz, I think it is. But so if you check out Stephen Schwartz, damn, I hope that is his name. He has done exactly this successfully and documented, where he's done controlled remote viewing, is which they call it, kind of following this Army protocol that was developed by Ingo Swann, who was just this psychic guy who said, oh, you want to do it for the Army, you should do it like this. And then, of course, it's like another one of these things. Like we said, it becomes, you must do it this way. The pen must go like this. And it's like, no, this guy was just trying to teach a bunch of Army guys. And he thought, you know, let's break it down. You know, it's just being psychic, you know. But anyways, Schwartz went on. He was interested in archaeology. And anyone can go. You guys can go. You ought to have him on. He's still around. He's still alive, and fantastic. You can watch movies he's done on the sites that he's uncovered through remote viewing. I mean, exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Remote view it. Go to that spot. Dig. There it is.
Wow. I mean, that sounds
Done
like
deal.
It's made for Snake Bros. Like
Snakes.
Yeah. So you know, but are you trying to? It sounds like you're trying to give us a little warning that maybe this is too connected to something that might be close to being evil. Is that what you're trying to say? Like, or is this just another tool, like a hammer, that I can use to either build a house or kill someone? Like, it's the tool itself isn't evil. Do you think it falls in that category, or are you worried that maybe it is something evil or connected too close?
Well, you know, again, I
know you don't know. I just want to know what you think.
Yeah, and we'd have a long discussion about what evil is, because I don't jump in there and say, oh, that's evil. You know, I don't have that kind of orientation. Where I'm leading, where I think, and you're picking up from it just from the way that you're asking the question, is to say, if you look at that and you go, wow, that's a way to win the lottery. Again, I think you're Ouija boarding it, you know, like a lot of people who are connected spiritually, like mediums or something like that. They go, hey, you know, you want to play with a Ouija board, that's fine. But you're kind of just like picking up the party line, you know, or going to that, what's that internet site where it just kind of spins around randomly and then connects you, you know, video wise. You know, that's, yeah. The people who are doing that are not the people you want to connect with. And similarly, but when you Ouija board, you might not be getting the spirit you connect with. And if you go out there and just randomly remote view, indications are that, you know, because like what you just said was kind of interesting, Russ. I want to go into the mind of someone else and do it. Like, whoa, that's really what you want to do? That seems to be possible.
Yeah.
And now what does that mean, that you're entering the mind? In particular, when we talk about splitting and stuff like that, and now does it have some connection? Because like, this is the other thing, like you guys watched that movie, Good, Third Eye Spies, and you liked it. I really drilled Lance, you know, the guy when he was on the phone.
Yeah.
Like, he hates me now probably and will never talk to me, another one-off interview. But he wanted to just kind of tell this really nice, cheery story about this nice old guy, Russell Targ, you know, and this, and I'm like, hey, man, that's cool. I love all that. And I love that he was a science guy. But he was in the MK Ultra program.
Right.
This was in the MK Ultra program.
Yeah.
And they go, yeah, well, when Sidney Gottlieb came along, Sidney Gottlieb, the American Mengele, as most people call him, you know, that learned the best secrets from the Nazis. And even though he was a Jewish psychologist, did what he was told and did some nasty, nasty things as part of MK Ultra, he was their boss. Yeah. So they can say, well, you know, well, that Sydney, we never liked him. You didn't like him, but he was your freaking boss. We all know how that works.
The way you keep talking about this, the way these spirits might act, or the possibility of opening that door and you're not knowing what you're letting in or through or whatever. It just keeps reminding me of is it the Tetragrammaton or Solomon's Key, the description of the 72 demons of Solomon.
Yeah.
You go through those descriptions and read about each one of those beings and all of the things that they can do for you, make you rich and wealthy and all of this kind of stuff. But then they also have all of these really nefarious aspects. And I guess the idea is that people try to use them or try to summon them in some way for some purpose. And they're like, oh, yeah, we can do that. But then they also manipulate in some way and create all of this chaos. I find that really interesting.
I'm really not. I've really kind of pulled back on the magic community, and the more that I see in terms of what they're doing and just the overall philosophical part of it seems to be lacking. Why are you doing that? I just had an interview with Chris Knowles. Do you guys know Chris Knowles? Has he ever been on the show?
No, we need to get him on for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's not really in your range, but he could be, because I think he's done a ton of that ancient stuff.
Yes, he has.
Kind of tangentially with his thing. He's a really good guy, but we're having this conversation. He's kind of the same thing. He's kind of going, man,
he's like, don't
just
do it.
I'm not seeing it. And I love the way he put it, kind of Chris Knowles style. He goes, if you think you're going to connect with a demon and you're going to make some deal with that demon, what do you have to offer?
Right.
What do you have to offer a being that is super powerful on that level, And it's like, it's chilling.
Yeah. That's right. He says,
whatever you have to offer, you don't want to give.
Yeah. You're trying to talk to some entity that you think has the power to change your life, to make you wealthy, to give you whatever you want, and you think you have something to offer it? Like, what are you going to give it? Yeah, I agree. Yep. So that's the thing, is remote viewing the same kind of thing? Because in that way, I like that. I guess you would have to ask, are we connecting with some being without even knowing it by trying to do remote viewing? Or is it something inherent to everybody?
Yeah. And that's where I come back again. I don't know.
Yeah.
But my working model is that we don't have to be really afraid here, because if we kind of follow the basics, back to what we're saying, you're a good person, you basically do the right thing. You're not trying to, abduct little kids and torture them and do these soul crushing, crazy things that we hear about. And you're generally, then you ought to go and experience what you experience, because you can have a beautiful experience doing a lot of different things that people would tell you should never do that. And you go, I don't know, I did it. It was fantastic. Whatever that experience is. So no, I wouldn't be like super cautious about going to a remote viewing class. I would just be, to me, it seems like the kind of work that you guys are doing and the work that I'm trying to do is to kind of see the full spectrum and to understand how it fits into this larger picture, and not just be charmed by the weekend course. And it's only $395. It was $595 last week, and we get it on sale. It's like, no, wait a minute. How does this fit into, who I am as a person, where I want to be?
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell a little anecdote here. I think I've told this to Kyle before, but this kind of explains why I'm asking you so many of these questions about whether this might be evil or not. I'm a big gamer. I love to play video games, and in a lot of these, there's a particular game, several of them actually. It's a whole series, but it doesn't matter. That has in the game, there's a series of dark evil gods. Okay, they're clearly dark. They want you, and when you're going through the game, you don't have to follow them, but if you encounter them, they will start asking you to do stuff, and most of the time it's bad stuff, right? There's always a reward. Like there's one of reward is always power in some way, but you have to do pretty bad stuff. So in the game, I'm like, no, I don't want, that if you encounter them, they ask you to do stuff and I would refuse it. But as soon as the God of knowledge shows up, I do everything he asks me to do in order to get access to that library. And I'm playing the game and I'm like, am I really like this? I know this is a demon of knowledge in the game. And I've resisted all these other demons, and they offer you power if you'll just go and do this and kidnap that person and kill them over on this altar. The demon of knowledge is like, help me extract this information from this shaman's mind so that I may have this secret that he's kept from me for thousands of years. And I'm like, okay. Because I know that he's going to give me the key to his library that's full of all this stuff. So so that anecdote is just, I know it's a game, but what I'm saying is like, yes, remote viewing, I've kind of started to look at it like that. I'm like, is this, to get real Christian on it, is this a temptation that I need to not follow?
Thank you for entering the confessional, Russ. With 3 Rosemarys, and you'll be absolved of your sins. No, I mean, my first takeaway is, man, we got to cut ourselves just a ton of slack. I mean, there's nothing, you're playing a video game. We have discernment.
Right.
We can do that. But it did remind me of one more story I wanted to throw you guys away because these stories are great. I'm interviewing this couple, Trish and Rob McGregor, fantastic people. They've together have written 100 books. Rob McGregor wrote all the books for George Lucas in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, sold millions of these books and stuff like that. And they've looked into all this kind of strange phenomena. So he tells me this story. Wes Meeks is this guy's name. He is sheriff, constable, whatever, down in Texas, in some little town in Texas. And he starts having these out-of-body experiences at night. And he has this one particular out-of-body experience, and he says, I was at the Hall of Knowledge, the Akashic Records. And it was beautiful. The building was like this, and he's describing detail. And there was this woman there, and she was going to guide me in and tell me, lead my way. And I got to talking to her, and, she was like older, middle-aged, and we're talking. And she goes, I'm not really like this. I mean, I do have a different appearance. And boom, she changes. And now she's really, really hot. And this is Wes Meeks' story. This is the sheriff in Texas. And he goes, well, one thing led to another. And I got to tell you, it was the most amazing, transformative experience having sex with her. And it wasn't even like, I can't even call it sex, but it was sex. Yeah. But it was phenomenal and all the rest of this. But here's the story gets interesting. That isn't interesting enough. So he comes back and he's having multiple experiences, out-of-body experiences at night, lying there next to his wife. And he doesn't want to forget these experiences. So he starts writing them down.
Oh, no.
And he stores them in the desk. And one day his wife comes along and reads these experiences. And there is, as you can imagine, holy hell to be paid in their household. But it kind of raises this question when you're in the video game, when you're in the lucid dream, what are the rules? What are the boundaries, And
yeah.
And whatever they are, the one thing I know is don't write the shit down. Don't write the shit down,
Don't write it down. Yeah. That's a great story. And yeah, the reason I told the video game story was to illustrate something that I know about myself that I've tried to tell Kyle this. I'm like, I'm afraid that I would fall to a demon of knowledge in that sense. You see what I'm saying? In the real
knowledge
world.
is your weakness. Yeah. Knowledge is your weakness.
That they have like secrets, and like maybe I can learn all this stuff. And I would tell myself, I'm just trying to learn something. I'm not hurting anybody. I just want to know. But So what I'm trying to say is I'm aware that this is a weakness that I have, that I would tell, and this is what I tell myself about remote viewing. Oh, it's something everybody can do. This is a way for me to get knowledge. I'm not going to be trying to win the lottery or trying to hurt somebody with any information. I want to find out what this ancient text really means. I want to find out if there's an archaeological site there. But if there is a chance that that is actually an evil path, I will need somebody else to tell me that, because I'll be like going down that path because I'm like, what's going on? I'm just getting some knowledge, guy.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I can relate a little bit.
Yeah. Ah, man. I hope it's not an evil path. So you're writing a book on this topic. Is that right? You're working on this?
Yeah, I'm working on it. But like I said, I keep talking to people and it keeps, expanding, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
We're moving. Do you think that's something you guys what will you do with this massive library that you're creating, the bots library?
Well, if we ever found the Akashic Records, I hope they're on audiobook. I don't have time to read all that stuff.
With the library of our podcast, I don't know. We view it as an ongoing conversation because see, like while all three of us are knowledge seekers, your method is somewhat different from ours. A lot of our podcast is just Kyle and I talking to each other. We're not very guest heavy. We do get guests on, but the vast majority of our shows are Kyle and I talking to each other about these ideas, basically having the same conversations we've been having about this stuff for a long time. So we both view it as an ongoing conversation, and it's sort of a record. You can go back and see how our thoughts have changed and how things have, and of course we've gotten guests on, but could that eventually one day turn into a book of ideas about these topics? Yeah, I think so. We've talked about that. Whether or not we would ever do that, I don't know. I don't know.
But it definitely is about asking the right questions, learning how to ask the right questions, looking for the truth.
Yeah.
I don't know how much progress we've made. It seems like the more progress you make, the more you realize, like, man,
we have no idea.
What's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean there. I mean, I think, that's kind of a weird kind of progress, isn't it? You know, it's like,
most of the progress is unlearning stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. Is there anything else you want to add? Where can people find you and your podcast? And you have a book that you wrote, right? Why
I wrote a book a few years ago titled Why Science is Wrong About Almost Everything. Yeah. Shows you where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I completely agree.
My kids are a little bit older. The oldest is 25 and the youngest is finishing up high school. But, how are they going to explain that to their friends? Why science is wrong. But Skeptiko. So people want to check it out. That's great. It's been great connecting with you guys. And let's do the Bruce Fenton thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got so much I want to ask you about that when we get there, because one of the things that I think is interesting about the ancient stuff is we still seem to want to compress it into a pretty narrow time frame, in my opinion.
Yep.
And one of the things that Bruce Fenton does, and this, Russ, because you said it, it's like, okay, let's go 780,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Whoa, hold on, now it just changes the focal lens a little bit. So that'd be a good. We'll get together on that one because you guys are fun to talk to.
All right, man.
Likewise.
Yeah. So everybody go to Skeptiko and unsubscribe.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Alex. Thank you so much. This has been a blast.
Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it.
All right, folks. There you have it. That was a great interview with Alex Tsakiris from Skeptiko. And, man, hope to have that guy back.
A lot to think about. A lot of stuff to think about.
Yeah, I've been going through his feed, picking out episodes, and they're all really good.
You didn't subscribe, though, right?
Lots of hard questions. Well, I just unsubscribed. That's great. Yeah.
He asks hard questions, and that's the nature of Skeptiko. I kind of wanted to get into some other stuff a little bit more, maybe a lot more than we were able to in this show. But I think we'll be doing future conversations with Alex. So
yeah, it was kind of all over the board, which is cool. It's like, you first hang out with somebody and you're just like, oh, what about this? Or, oh man, that's making me think about that. And
yeah,
I kind of like the zero format.
Right.
In the first conversation, then we can talk later and say, hey, let's deep dive into this or that.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it was really, really good. Great guy. Very enjoyable to hang out with and talk to.
Yep, and lots of things to think about and be prepared to be destroyed in the Skeptiko fashion in the next show. Because like, man,
I think that's just a video game, Russ. Come on, man.
No, there was, what was it that he kind of came after me, and I was like, all right, man, this. Oh, it was the alien thing. I was like, I'm not saying it's one or the other. He was like, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. It's kind of my nature, and it is. So if you enjoy listening to someone who really digs into these topics and just, he kind of does, he doesn't hold punches. So when somebody says something, even if he mostly agrees with the person, when somebody says something on his show where he's like, all right, hold on, I'm gonna have to pin you down on that one. And he does. He pins them down. And then he starts rattling off all these names of these people he's spoken to, who've written books and have published papers and everything. He's like, how can you say what you just said when all these other people are saying this stuff? And it's really, it's great. So I really recommend that everybody go check out Skeptiko. He has over 400 shows. Most of them are basically only available on his website as archives now, but you can, like our website, the older shows you have to go to the website to listen to them. But he has interviewed a lot of people, like he said, Rupert Sheldrake, Dean Radin. He's had Jacques Vallée on. So the back catalog of Skeptiko is fantastic, and he explores NDEs and consciousness and ETs and conspiracies and he even dives into the ancient civilization stuff, like his interview with Bruce Fenton, which is recent, is really, really good. So I definitely want to get back with him on that and maybe dive more into that topic, because I listened to that interview and I was like, okay, we have to get this guy on our show. And
cool.
Maybe we can do that through Alex, because I was listening to that show and I was like, I want to get this guy on our show and maybe have him do a series.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Because his story, that the stuff he's talking about, can't be crammed into one episode. And I was like, I want to just reach out to him and be like, bro, we have a podcast.
Guest deep dive.
Yes, a guest deep dive. How about you come on our show and we take as many episodes as it needs for you to go through everything you need to talk about to explain this. So I think that'd be really cool. So I hope you all enjoyed that. We definitely did. And as you know, you can get a hold of us, Brothers of the Serpent at gmail.com, website, brothersoftheserpent.com. Check out the Encyclopedia, the Glossary, the SnakeSkins, which is our merchandise store. Support us with the Pyramid Scheme through Patreon or through PayPal. Give us reviews wherever you can. Share the shows wherever you can. Follow us on Twitter at Snake Bros with No Vowels. Join the Facebook group or the Discord, which you can find links to on the website. Also, the Library of the Serpent, run by Jeff. Don't forget about History Shift, who makes all of our YouTube videos. Follow him on Twitter and on YouTube. Pod Doodles, who takes some of our podcasts and turns them into videos where you can watch him doodling while listening to the show. Thanks to Where Did the Road Go, Uncharted X, Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape, Grimerica, Conspiranormal, the 7 Ages Audio Journal, and Skeptiko. Yep. Thank you guys very much.
And special thanks to Anne.
Oh, yes.
For the wonderful solstice donation. She says, what did she say? The advantage to celebrating solstice is you get to do it twice a year. That's a good one. And also, Zachariah. Thanks, buddy. Also a very, very generous donation to the
Yes.
pyramid scheme. Much thanks.
Yeah, and we have emails and reviews and other listener communications backing up because we've had so many guests. We will get to those. I've got them saved up. So we will eventually get to those, guys. Keep sending them to us. Keep responding. I want to hear what you think about this show. So thank you so much, and we are going to get to them. All right?
Yeah.
Good night, Adamu.
Love you.
Always have.
Always well.
Get back to work.